English Forward presents.
Hello.
Hi, good morning, Josh.
Hey, Mitch. Sorry about joining a little late.
No, that's great, man. It's so good to have you here. Can you hear me clearly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How are you doing today?
What am I doing? I actually I got up this morning quite early, and I took the kids down to the beach. We went for a surf.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's so beautiful here this morning. In Mays, the weather's wonderful where we live, and it's absolutely glassy, and it was really nice. And
That's
yourself?
amazing. I've had an early day as well. I've been in the office from morning.
Okay.
Nothing quite as spectacular or amazing as yours. We're in Bangalore, so we don't have a beach, but the weather here is fairly good as well.
Okay.
It's nice and cloudy. For us, good is not very hot. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, that's good. What time is it there now?
It's about 1:30 p.m.
Okay, so you're a little bit ahead of us, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we 10 in the morning here.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Are you ready to get going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Right. I'm just going to kick off and introduce you to the listeners, and then we can go from there. Darshan, I'm really excited to be chatting to you today. Straight off the back of English Forward and Bank of Hodler signing a partnership and collaboration agreement. And it's really great to have you here. I'd just like to introduce you to our audience. We're going to be chatting to Darshan Bhatia, co-founder and CEO of Bank of Hodlers. And Darshan, just wanted to welcome you to the English Forward podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be chatting to you. I'd actually like to just start off with a couple of questions, just so we can get to know each other a little bit forward before we get into the industry specific stuff. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Could you tell me just a little bit about yourself, where you're from and where you're based in the world?
So I'm from Bangalore in India, and I'm an engineer by education. And very early on, I realized that engineering wasn't what I wanted to do. So I picked up and started reading about finance. Immediately after I graduated, I ended up working in a private equity fund that focused on, it was a combination of a private equity fund and an NBFC, which is a non-banking financial corporation. So they would either do equity or debt investments against assets, these assets being more traditional assets like real estate. And I looked at the rate of returns that these corporations were making, and it blew my mind. They were returning about 18 to 20% per annum on their capital for their investors. So
that's amazing.
So during my time there, I realized that I was on the right side of capitalism my entire life, because when I looked at what work we were really doing, and when I looked at the kind of returns that we were making, I started to dig deep and look at where is it that the value is really being created. And it was fairly evident to me that the price of the capital and the money that was being made was coming out of every residential home buyer. So just to give you perspective, this fund would invest only in Tier 1 real estate developers and give them a line of credit or an equity investment where they would use this capital to finance their project, so that when they do make the sale a couple of years later, they and the investor would get the returns that they wanted. And the price of capital was being factored into the cost of construction. And what this ended up meaning is, instead of folks probably taking a 20-year mortgage on their home, they would end up taking a 30-year mortgage because of expensive capital. And the second this was evident, I couldn't do it anymore, and I ended up quitting. And my love for finance still remained. And I did a significant amount of research on opportunities in disrupting finance as we know it. And that's where the Bank of Hodlers is born.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I think you're 100% right. And those loans that you guys were doing, were those sort of personal loans, or they commercial loans as well?
So they were not loans to the end user. They were loans to corporations who were building these multi-story projects. So we are talking about 1,000 apartments and above at a go. So these were commercial loans to entities, and it was backed by the underlying land value. So it was commercial loans against the land.
Okay, excellent. I'd actually like to come back to that because my background is in property actually, and so I've had a fair amount of exposure to commercial loans, both in South Africa and in the States, and the pitfalls and difficulties that go along with those. So it'll be interesting for us to chat about that just now. But if I had to ask you, who is Darshan Bhatia, what would you say to me?
Darshan is someone who genuinely believes in the decentralized finance movement and loves what blockchain can do for finance as we know it. And I've pretty much dedicated the last 2 to 2.5 years, and I work 7 days a week. So that's all I do right now. That's
okay.
Yeah.
No, you're passionate about it, and I think we share that same vision, Darshan, and that I think there's a lot of things in the world that need to change for the good of most people. And I'm so glad that you've picked up a project like that and you're running with it, because it needs good people to drive and to spearhead that. Your personal your previous experience in finance, etc., has obviously equipped you for the role that you're in now. And what inspires you to go ahead? I mean, to put in 7 days a week and work for the last couple of years. You're right at the cutting edge of technology and what's happening. What keeps you going? What's your inspiration?
I think I've always known that I would end up starting up somewhere deep down. So the way I've structured my learning was such that I was equipping myself with soft and hard skill sets to start up. And now that everything is on the line and I'm actually getting to do what I've always wanted to do, I can't imagine doing anything else. And every morning I wake up and the first thing that I do is rush towards getting ready so that I can get to the office, and I don't leave until I'm extremely tired and I just want to go to sleep. So I think the fact that I'm doing exactly what I want to do, and I genuinely believe in what decentralized finance can do for the world is what keeps me going, especially because I love numbers and I love finance in general. And I'm very much a part of the system as we know it today. And I see the shortcomings. And it's extremely personal for me because of my love for the current industry. And I would say my burning urge to make things better for the users who I've seen getting exploited so often.
Yeah, that's 100% true. You touched on learning there. And I think it's something that you possibly take for granted because you're very self-motivated and what have you. But if you could maybe just tell us, how do you approach learning a new skill in an environment that is shifting and changing without really clearly defined boundaries, etc.? How would you approach your learning to that?
Yeah, so I think learning is probably right at the center of the way I personally operate and as well as the company operates, because it's so essential for the industry that I'm in. So how I personally look at learning is that if you're not learning, you're already a dinosaur, especially given that crypto and blockchain timelines are significantly, the rate of change in this sector is significantly higher than I would say any other sector that I have seen or observed. So if we're not on our toes, we're already obsolete. So every day I probably spend about 1.5 to 2 hours consuming some form of content and learning something that I didn't know the previous day. And this typically is in the form of reading books or listening to podcasts or going through articles and Medium specifically, but that's, I would say, not as much as my learning through podcasts and books.
If you could just highlight one of each, one book, one podcast that you're finding really relevant right now, what would those be?
So the hard thing about hard things It's a book by Ben Horowitz, who's one of the founding members of Netscape. Sorry, he was an employee at Netscape under Mark Andreessen, and he and Mark Andreessen founded Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most successful VC firms. I think that's one of the best books that I've come across for anybody who's starting up. And from a podcast perspective, I think Masters of Scale, which is Reid Hoffman's podcast with Wait But Why, is phenomenal for entrepreneurs.
That is excellent. Hey, yeah, I'm actually enjoying that as well. Really, really excellent. Is there anything absurd or any funny particular habit that you have when you're approaching a task, or anything that is unusual to Darshan?
I try really hard to not let my preconceived notions play into my my action. So I before I start a task, I try to write down what are my preconceived notions on the task, and I proactively try to keep a watch on them while I approach doing research, because the tasks that I do aren't necessarily repetitive in nature, because again, the nature of a startup is that you're always facing a new challenge that you've not done before, and the second you figured something out, you have help who you can pass that on to do. So every time I approach something that's crucial to the Bank of Hodlers, it's something that we've not done before. And in that case, it typically requires a significant amount of research and understanding of the problem statement in itself. And writing down my preconceived notions on how it needs to be done helps me keep a check on A, the preconceived notions in itself, and B, ensures that I'm getting a broader perspective when I approach the problem and I'm not narrowing it down.
Yeah, that's actually a great habit. I'm making a note here because it's something that would be really useful to me too. And Darshan, do you rely a lot on, or more on, data or intuition, or is it a combination?
So data isn't as widely available for startups as in general as we would like. So given where we are, we're an early stage startup. And although I would like to lean into data, so when I look at behavior on the platform, for example, and optimizing funnels, that's a great, there's no substitute towards looking at data to optimize for your product. There really isn't. But on the other hand, when we're doing things that really hasn't been done before, which is problems and problem statements that we're doing quite often, there is no data to lean on. And we're quite comfortable going after our intuition as long as we're keeping our preconceived assumptions and notions in check, which is what we try to do very hard.
Yeah, makes sense. And just on a completely different bet here, I know you said you work 7 days a week and you've done that for the last couple of years, but when you do have leisure time, how do you spend it?
Okay, so I typically spend a good amount of time meditating. So I do at least a 30-minute session, and I ensure that I squeeze in a 1 to 1.5 hour workout as well. I ensure that I have that kind of personal time. I also make an effort to spend time with my family and my friends. And I would like to say that I do this, I would like to do this a little more than I'm doing right now, but it's what I lean in to do as long as I'm not at work. It's always going, I don't skip meditation at all. So I do meditation 7 days a week again. I do a session by isolating the world and focusing on my breath and trying to keep the mind still, because that's walking away from these sessions really, really helps me start the day really well. And outside of that, working out, I mean, keeping my treating my body as a temple is something that I've always done. So I'm a vegetarian, and I don't put in, and I don't drink. So I don't consume any substance that I think would affect me in the long term. Outside of that, I spend time with my family. That's pretty much what I do.
That sounds amazing. And so typically what I'm picking up is that you meditate first thing in the morning to set the tone of your day. And then would your exercise be throughout the day or straight after meditation?
I try to squeeze in an exercise when I'm not productive at work. I ensure that I joined the gym the closest to our office. So
Okay.
I typically go for a workout before dinner, and then immediately after I have my dinner at work itself. So immediately after that, I'm back to another session of work.
Okay.
It's between before dinner for me.
Yeah, excellent. I must say, I'm the same with exercises. I try and do something every single day, whether it's a surf or a run or something like it, because I find it just gives me a chance to completely switch off and clear my mind, which I need to do. It's like a reset, and then I can actually go out and tackle the tasks that are ahead of me. So,
and that's so important, right? Because we get caught up in the rut of what's going on and what is pressing, but this really helps. It's surprisingly relaxing working out for me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Absolutely vital. You've been involved in different sectors and things. What's the most unusual business that you've been involved in?
So when I was in university, I remember this time when the iPhone 4S, the iPhone 5 ditched the micro SIM slot and switched to a nano SIM. And most of the SIMs needed to be physically cut for it to be fitted in because the carriers weren't supporting out of the box nano SIMs at that point. And it was a significant problem for, I would say, the cream in India, which is people who have the propensity to pay a significant amount to acquire an iPhone, even though it's not launched in India. So what I ended up doing is importing, and this was given that I was about 18 at the time, I imported about 100 micro SIM to nano SIM cutters, and I sold them on eBay for about 1,000% markup. So
well done.
that was a shot, and it only lasted, I think, a couple of months because by then the carriers caught on, and there were more micro SIM cutters available, but it was a fun little experiment for me to earn some pocket change in college.
So the consummate entrepreneur. That's great. I'd like to just chat a bit about Bank of Hodlers and English Forward, banking and education, and how we can work together in the blockchain space. But I'd like to know a little bit more about Bank of Hodlers. So maybe if you could just cover for the guys listening. Like for me, the one thing is Bank of Hodlers, quite an unusual name. Where did the name come from? How did you guys start?
So I started in a monastery, funnily enough. I decided that I didn't want to do what I was doing, and I took a couple of months off from work to disconnect from the world, to think about exactly what my actions were adding up to. And when I typically decide to take something on, I try to put myself in a situation where when I'm 60 and I look back, am I going to look back at this time as, yes, this is what I've always wanted to do, and I think it added to creating value in the world? And if the answer was no, I would not do it. So that's a really difficult question to ask yourself when you're about 23 years old. So given how distracting the world can be as well. So I decided to take a couple of months off. I disconnected. I switched off my phone for that duration. I stayed in Sri Lanka in a monastery for some time. And that's where the Bank of Hodlers was born. So I really started to ask myself, where is disruption in finance really happening? And if this disruption is happening, is it pro-consumer? And what are these technologies that are driving this disruption that are pro-consumer? And with those questions in mind, I started really digging into the available solutions out there. And I started really listening to what is it that the community, the earliest adopters, really cared about, and why did they really care about what they were caring about. So even though I was off the internet, I was still picking up a significant number of books, and that's essentially where I realized that there's significant opportunity in treating cryptocurrencies as an asset and offering decentralized financial solutions around your fiat and crypto integrated into one unified experience that's extremely easy to use. So at the time when I was evaluating starting up, there were very, very few really good customer-centric products out there. And Binance was at its earliest days, and I saw it take off. And when I really looked at that as a case study, it was fairly evident that the only thing, and kudos to them, that the thing that they did well was they kept their customers first in terms of user experience, in terms of the product just working, in terms of listening and taking feedback and implementing on the feedback. And I think the solution, the problem statement of when people want to buy in cryptocurrencies, converting fiat, has been solved for through exchanges such as Coinbase. And even if you, let's say, have already bought in some sort of a stable coin and you want to get exposure on any cryptocurrency, Binance has solved that. But that's just what's going to get you into the space. That's not really helping achieve what the movement was set out to achieve, which is a solution for peer-to-peer payments, which is a solution for store of value, which is a solution for non-custodian ownership of assets. And that's the ethos around why we've started.
That sounds good. And where does that name come from?
The name? Well, I wanted the name to resonate with the kind of people that, with our target audience, which were people who are holding crypto for the mid to long term, as well as for the name to be relatable in the sense that, okay, you deal with Bank of, let's say, America, or Bank of Baroda in India, or Bank of India in India, where you have a certain expectation of certain services that they provide, such as payments, storage of money, and debt as a layer in general. And that's what we wanted to do. And hence we wanted to stitch together the experience that you're used to getting while giving you and very clearly talking to the kind of people we want to attract. So if let's say you are a hodler and you know who a hodler is, you typically, what we've seen is it's quite a polarizing name. People like it. And if you don't know what a hodler or who a hodler is, the product's not for you anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love it. It's when I first saw it, it's unusual, and it really caught me immediately. So I think it's a great name. I'm actually interested in pleasure, man. I'm interested in finding out how students can access loans within the Bank of Hodlers. But to understand that fully, what I'd like to ask you is if you could just explain banking in general and then get around to the specifics of Bank of Hodlers so that people listening can understand what the differentiation is. And maybe you could just touch as a start on personal loans, because I think a lot of our users would be interacting with your platform and looking for some sort of a personal loan. And if you could start off there, that would be great. Thanks, Darshan.
Sure. So when we're talking about banking, let me restrict our conversation to retail banking, which is the Barclays and the Lloyds of the world and the Bank of Americas of the world, which is consumer facing, typically solves for very few use cases. That is a broad market product. So when we look at the retail banks of the world, they solve for three primary use cases. One is safe storage of money, and they do this through a bank account. The next is they give you a way to easily pay for things, easy and instantaneous solution around payments, which is done through your credit cards, debit cards, and today internet banking as well. And then the third is if you're not using your capital, they give you a way to earn interest on that, or you can walk up to a bank and get a loan. So it's the whole debt layer as well. So the three primary verticals of a retail bank that about 90% of the people use a retail bank for is storage of money, payments, and debt. And that's the ethos around what we're chasing as well. And how is it that we're quite different from the way retail banking is treated today and is done today, primarily because retail banks see the internet as an auxiliary way to reach their customers and probably an acquisition channel, and something that they need to do given that the world is moving to the internet. But they're primarily centric around physical locations of operations. They have obsolete systems of clearing capital in different modes of transactions, their systems are not designed to be internet first. Not forget decentralized first. They're not even internet first. So there's a significant. I mean, they're dinosaurs today, if you ask me. So there's a significant amount. Sorry.
I say you're right. I agree with you on it.
Yeah. So there's a significant amount of scope in terms of disruption, and we've seen certain firms do fairly well in the UK specifically. Firms such as Monzo and Revolut, where their fundamental premise is we're going to be internet first. They initially started off with a wallet plus a card. It's a prepaid card. And then both of them moved on to acquiring their banking license so that they could give users current accounts and so on. But they started off by cutting out the clutter and gave them the solution around storage and payments. And they do a very, very good job at it. They also solved a very important use case for anybody in the EU, which is when I'm traveling from one country to another, I don't want to pay ridiculous interchange fees. I don't want to go about acquiring different currencies and holding on to them. I want a seamless experience. And what these apps did is, based on your location data, they would automatically give you the bank interchange fee and say, hey, guess what? We've noticed that you've moved from the UK to France, and you moved from the UK to Germany, and your exchange rate from the pound to the euro is so much, and this is the actual bank exchange rate. Guess what? We don't charge a fee. You can use the exact card that you use. Congratulations. Have a great trip. That kind of an experience, along with the intelligent analytics around spending, is what caused these internet-first products to go viral. And they're both worth roughly about $700 million each, comfortably. I mean, they both raised at least $300 million each. So they're doing really well. And our premise is around creating the borrowing and lending platform before we do storage and payments, because cryptocurrencies as a category in itself is both a currency and an asset. So Bitcoin, as an example, is both a currency and an asset. So if you were a pure crypto user, your storage and payments is already solved for you.
Yeah.
In the sense that if, let's say, you're paying somebody else who has a Bitcoin wallet, you can do so without the need for any third-party reliance. If you want to store your crypto, you can always store it in any wallet of your choosing, right? Or you could even host and store it yourself. But what wasn't solved for our specific demographic was the fact that if, let's say, I have capital that is just lying around that I don't intend to use, what banks typically do is they offer an interest rate and they lend it out on the other side. And that infrastructure doesn't exist. The whole credit infrastructure doesn't exist for digital assets. And that's why we ended up building that first. And yeah. So today, if you owned Bitcoin or Ethereum, and we intend to support the top 15 currencies very soon, you can come to the platform, deposit the cryptos that you own, and you automatically earn an interest the experience that you would typically get with something like a Lloyd's or a Barclays. You'd earn interest automatically, and it's withdrawable at any time. And you can come and even get a loan against that. And what you can also do is, of course, we have the wallet page where you can send and receive cash as well. So you can do the whole storage, payments, and borrowing and lending on the platform today. But what we intend to do moving forward is build a better solution around payments, where we remove the dependence on both parties involved to have adopted Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. So as an example, if I have Bitcoin and the system knows that I prefer paying in Bitcoin, and I'm paying someone who doesn't know what Bitcoin is, doesn't know what cryptocurrencies is, and for all intents and purposes doesn't even care about it. All they want to do is get paid in the dollar, for example. So we're building the infrastructure around making that Bitcoin to convert to the dollar, and them redeeming this dollar in their bank account, a 2-click process.
That'd be amazing. That'd really, really be good.
So for a money sender, such as, for example, me, when I'm paying Bitcoin, All I need to enter is the other person's number, and I don't even need to know whether the other person accepts Bitcoin or no. It just happens exactly the same way, and that's the great experience for someone who's already adopted, and that's what we're trying to go for here. And that's how we see solving for peer-to-peer payments well, by removing the dependence on network effects being as a success parameter.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because it makes it seamless, and then it's intuitive again, because why do you want to retrain an audience that's got particular fixed ideas? If they like the dollar and they're happy to work in the dollar, and you have someone on the other side of the equation that wants to work in crypto, that transaction should be seamless. So that's good. I just want to wind back one thing to what you said. Let's just say one of our users wanted to get a loan. They own Bitcoin. They want to use Bank of Hodlers and deposit it and get the whole process streamlined and done. If you could just help us understand how the process would practically work and how you actually secure the loan, because the biggest thing in banking is obviously being able to recover the money that you've loaned out and making sure that the person applying for the loan is creditworthy. How do you guys handle that?
That's a really good question. So what if, let's say you're a user and you've adopted Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency for that matter, and you have an unexpected expense that needs to be, let's say you have an unexpected expense, what you have two options. Typically, if let's say you owned a normal asset class, let's take real estate, for example. You could either go to a broker and try to sell that piece of real estate, book your capital gains tax, and whatever money is remaining, you can expense, or you could go to a bank and get a mortgage against that piece of real estate that you own. Option number 2 doesn't exist for cryptocurrency users. So that's what we're going for today. So today, if you had an expense in crypto up to this point, all you could do is go to an exchange, sell your crypto, letting go of your future upside. Keep that in mind. Depending on your on where you're a citizen of and where you pay taxes, you'd have to pay taxes on the capital gains that you've done. So let's say if you bought it at 500, let's say you put in $500 and it's worth about $1,000 today, you'd have to pay capital gains on the $500 that you've gained. And you'd also have to let go of the upside of the crypto. Let's say if it increases over time, you won't be able to gain that. Instead of that, you can come and deposit that $1,000 worth of cryptocurrencies on the Bank of Hodlers platform, and within 2 clicks, receive your dollar loan in the wallet itself today in a stablecoin. But what we're working towards doing very soon is within 2 days, within 2 clicks, getting that loan amount straight in your bank account. And coming to your question, which is judging credit worthiness, because this is collateralized, credit worthiness isn't a necessary check for us because it's a secured loan. And the way we structure this is, let's say if you have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and you bought in at 500, you'd end up with roughly $750 after taxes, and you could expense that, letting go of your upside. Over on the Bank of Hodlers platform, you can get roughly the same amount as a loan while holding on to your upside. So you can get about $700 worth on the platform that you can withdraw into your bank account. And soon we'll make sure that we're building in the system that it already reaches it instantly reaches your bank account as well. And once you pay back the $700 plus whatever interest that you've accrued, you get your $1,000 worth of Bitcoin back.
Okay, just on that. I've got the loan now. I've got my $700 and I use it. And now I want to repay it.
Yeah.
How do I repay it?
So let's say the interest rate that you've got against that loan is about 5% per annum. And you've decided to have the loan out for 6 months. You owe up roughly 2.5%, which is about $25. No, how much is that? $17.5 is how much you owe. So you'd have to pay $717.5 back to the platform. And once you do that, you get 1/8 of a Bitcoin, which is 0.125 Bitcoin back, which is what you deposited initially. So if the price of Bitcoin is a lot higher, great, you get the upside as well.
Okay, so I get the Bitcoin released back to me. So initially, if we go to the front end of the transaction, when I deposit the Bitcoin with Bank of Hodlers, how is that held and secured?
Sure. So that Bitcoin is kept in a cold wallet, and it's marked as yours. We do not touch that funds. We do not have the authority to touch that fund. It's a multi-signature wallet between the lender, borrower, and us, and we cannot touch that funds. And the second you do come back and let's say pay back the loan, the principal plus interest owed, it automatically comes back to your wallet, which is withdrawable.
So with that multi-signature, all three parties have got to agree and sign before the money gets released.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's excellent. That was one of the things I wasn't sure about, but that's very clear, very transparent. I like that. I mean, down the line, we obviously talking about personal loans and things. Does Bank of Hodlers do commercial loans?
As long as, so what we do is we look at, we have a KYC process in place above a certain transaction volume. And as long as the loans are collateralized for now, yes, we do commercial loans as well. So if, let's say, you'd like to borrow Bitcoin or even borrow dollars, you just have to come to the platform, do the KYC for the company or the individual, and once you clear the KYC, you can get the loan. So yes, we do support commercial loans as well.
Okay, so it's just basically the same process. I deposit Bitcoin, it gets secured in a cold wallet, it has a multi-signature security on it, and against that, I can loan dollars or whatever it is, and then repay it on whatever agreed terms that we have in the contract.
Exactly.
Okay, simple. That's great. You know, with obviously you get the centralized idea, which we have now all around us with the main retail banks and commercial banks, and then we have decentralization. And from what I'm picking up with you guys, it's sort of a middle ground that you're going for. If I'm right, you can correct me if not, because sometimes on the one end of the scale it's too extreme, and the other end of the scale is too extreme, and we have to work within the constraints of what we have anyway. How does Bank of Hodlers see that?
Yeah, so you're spot on in the sense that we're not on either side of the spectrum at this point. We're trying very hard to lean towards the decentralized side, but there are certain infrastructure and technology constraints that just don't allow us just don't allow us to do that. Primarily around a lot of the tokens in the top 15, which is what we support, don't have a smart contract infrastructure around that. Right? So if you're looking at Ethereum or an ERC20 token, you can simply write a smart contract and be a clean non-custodian platform that where you're not touching the user's funds at all. But for other tokens, that's simply not possible, because that's not how they're engineered, that's not how they're designed. So what we're looking to build is, if there is a smart contract infrastructure that exists out there for a particular token, we're going to write those contracts so that we are non-custodian for those tokens. But if there is a token that doesn't support the technology because of the limitations of today, then we do the multi-signature solution that we just spoke about. And the reason why we didn't want to pick the completely decentralized approach is because that would mean we would exclude a significant amount of the market capitalization of what we're trying to go after. And a lot of firms have made that decision as well, which we totally respect. So we wanted to chase the entire pie and not a piece of the pie. And the trade-off had to be that we had to find a middle ground so that we're A, compliant, and B, this is technologically feasible. But we would like to keep working towards leaning towards decentralization, as long as it's not a trade-off for user experience and customer experience in general?
I think it's actually a very wise decision because you have a marketplace that's been educated for many years in a particular vein. And what you're trying to do is get them to accept a new technology. And sometimes when it's too extreme, it's actually very difficult for people to change. But when it's aligned, especially with the commercial sort of area and what have you, it's easier to get going. And I think the critical portion in your business and in education of what we're doing is actually getting adoption and getting that critical mass component up so that you can actually, grow the market. I know that with obviously with blockchain and what have you, adoption is critical in getting that critical mass. I'd just like to get your opinion on it and maybe look at a couple of different things in the blockchain space with that in mind. How do you guys see adoption and actually getting to a point where you have the critical mass that can actually scale?
Yeah. So I think you brought up something that totally struck a bell with me as well, which is education is going to be very, very key towards making decentralized and blockchain-based solutions mainstream. And education around the advantages and the limitations as well is just as important, primarily because slapping the word blockchain on any solution waters down what it can possibly achieve, and it can be quite overwhelming given how confusing and new this can be for a lot of people. So understanding the use cases of where blockchain can be extremely valuable is going to be very crucial for the killer app, whichever that is, to reach scale. So coming back to that, which is what could be the killer app and what could help blockchain as a technology and its underlying solutions that people are working on becoming main scale would be, of course, education is one really big piece of the puzzle there. But secondly, finding and creating genuine value, not at the cost of user experience, is another. And there are a few solutions that I think can pan out. They are on the roads or on track towards getting to, I would say, ubiquitous acceptance, but we still have some time, and education is going to play a significant role in this becoming a reality.
Yeah, I think creating value is ultimately the key, because if you think of the man in the street, he doesn't actually care. What he wants is he wants a solution. That solution must save him money, be seamless, mustn't be hard for him to use. And if he can use it and it benefits him, then you move forward one chess piece on the board. And if you can do that for one banker or one person using your product, you can do it for 10. If you can do it for 10, you can do it for 100, 1,000, etc. So I like what you said, keeping it simple and creating value. It's certainly the way we're looking at our product too, with education and keeping it really simple and intuitive for people that are going to use it.
I'd like to add something here. I think the best kind of blockchain solutions are ones that don't market to be blockchain solutions and yet give the users the advantages of what the technology can do. And keeping this in mind and filtering through potential solutions and potential companies that users come across would be very important. So if, let's say, you see a company saying, talking about how blockchain is the next big thing, and there isn't a clear value prop or a clear value add as opposed to a non-blockchain solution, that's a problem. And typically a good blockchain solution would be one where they're not really stressing about the fact that they're a blockchain solution, and yet they're better at what they do than anything else that you've used before. And that's what's going to be the killer app.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's it's the language as well, because I don't know. I mean, if your friends are different to mine, but if I talk about blockchain, 90% of them, their eyes glaze over and they're not really sure what I'm talking about. They've heard of Bitcoin. They might have dabbled a little bit and bought some crypto or what have you, but they don't really understand it. And if you talk in simple, plain language, but the underlying tech is blockchain and solves the problems and creates solutions, then I think we're onto a winner.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. And yes, most of my circle is exactly the same as you just described.
It was once said that if a user can't find it, it doesn't exist. You've got an amazing product. It's a great solution for people that are unbanked all the way through. But how do you get your business to stand out, above the crowd, above the noise? What do you guys do? What do you focus on to get your message out?
Thank you so much for the kind words. Addressing the question around standing out, I think picking a simple use case on the exchanges itself tells us a lot of what people value, which is people coming first is important, or being first to market is important, but not as important as doing it well. And if you do it well, you win over time. And a simple example, as I've been stressing before, is the exchange use case. Binance was incorporated in 2017, and they are the market leader in terms of daily transaction volumes. Now, by any measure of timing, one can fairly assume that they were late. But the reason why they achieved the scale that they were, of course, they had the money to scale this as well. But the reason why people stick on to Binance today and not move on to any other exchange, including myself, is because what they say they do, they actually do, and what they do it incredibly well. And that's what we're trying to do as well. And if we say we're going to do loans against cryptocurrencies, the experience that we're going to go after is no matter what time, no matter which location, no matter the kind of volumes that you're looking to do, if you want to do it on the platform, it happens instantly. And messaging around the fact that, given that this market is so new, we're not finding it hard to stand out at this point. But again, given that we think we have something going here, there are going to be more players entering in the market, just like how there are many more exchanges coming on as time goes. There are going to be more crypto lending and banking companies out there. And the way I see us standing out is by just putting our heads down, listening to our customers, and ensuring that the product user experience is phenomenal from the time you hear about us for the first time until you probably and hopefully become one of our micro influencers, where you actually talk very highly about our platform. Until that entire experience, we want to ensure that you have a phenomenal experience, and that's what we're going to work on.
Yeah, that sounds great. Darshan, you're a pioneer in what will become the new normal in banking. And just from picking up and chatting to you, you've got incredible energy, you've got vision, you've got focus, you're very disciplined, which I think is extremely important. And you've got a clear mission. What motivates you? How do you maintain that high level of output and follow through in an industry that is new and changing and needs to be defined?
I think the thing that motivates me is my fundamental belief of how I spend my time and whether this is adding up to making things better than they were. And as I mentioned earlier as well, I tend to think really hard about how I spend my time. And if I think that my time isn't spent well creating value to whoever that we work with today and tomorrow, we immediately scrap that. And that's, with that in mind, given that we are where we are and given what we're trying to do, we see so much that's wrong with banking today. And Bank of Hodlers, in our perspective, is a complete opposite to that. We're transparent to the full extent that we possibly can be. And our incentives are thoroughly aligned with our users. If they don't make money, we don't, and which is one of the major problems of banking as well, right? I mean, they're not held accountable for their users' losses. I mean, they like to gloat when they're making money for their users, but they gloat anyway, even if they don't, because they're making their money. It's just a simple problem of alignment of incentives. So given my prior background in finance and the way I've seen people adopt solutions, if it works for them, we're extremely passionate about making banking better. And with this clarity in mind on what the shortcomings are, where is it that they're essentially taking a trade-off of where they're not putting their users first and just primarily focusing on putting our users first as opposed to the banks over there, we're not struggling with motivation at all, because we're very well informed of what they do well and what they don't, and we're extremely passionate about disrupting it.
Yeah, but I think that just comes down to culture. You've got that at your heart, and your organization actually follows that, and that's important. So stay true to the cause, and I'm sure you guys are going to be very successful. 5 years from now, give us a snapshot of what you think the future will look like at the intersection of banking and education, and how, Bank of Hodlers and students, how Bank of Hodlers can actually change students' lives in the future.
Yeah. So I think banking as we know it would be nothing like what we know today. I wouldn't be surprised if 100-year-old bank or multiple 100-year-old banks across the world start declaring for bankruptcy and trying to reorganize their book, or try to look for multiple acquisitions, primarily because they've lost their better or the best users. So when you look at industries like insurance or lending in general, to defeat the market leaders, you don't have to acquire more users than them. What you need to do is take away their best users, and their business models are such that their best users are paying for their worst users. Let's say in the case of a default, that's always done. In case of insurance not panning out, that's the business model, right? So to make the bigger banks get there, what new age companies need to do is just pick off their top 20% of their best paying customers, and their books won't add up. They won't make money and they will fail. So as long as we focus around, new age companies focus around creating value and educating the users to a point where they understand the difference between bank A and B and the advantages of one versus another, they're assuming that information is clearly done, which is again a function of the new age companies as well as the education companies in the space doing a good job. But once that is done, switching over, convincing the best users to switch over to a new age company, at least 20%, the top 20% would definitely be done. And the traditional institutional banks are going to have a significant problem with that. And with this in mind, the new age banks are going to be the ones that are rapidly growing, the ones that people are extremely happy about. Think of the experience that Amazon has given most users for purchasing a product, and think of your experience at banking today. That's the level of satisfaction that one has with the experience of Amazon is what banks are going to be, or what new age banks are going to try to go after. And I think that's going to be the case in 5 years' time.
That's a very bright future for, I think, humanity as a whole, because it'll put it'll take a lot of the money out of the hands of where they shouldn't be and put it back into the community, which is really excellent. Darshan, I just want to say thank you so much. I really have thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. And I'd love to meet you somewhere down the track. I'm sure we will bump into each other. But just to say thanks again for your time and for being with us on the show.
Thanks so much, Mitch. Thanks for having us. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks a lot.
Enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, you too. Cheers.
You were listening to an English Forward production, the web's largest Learn English community and Q&A site. Everything you need to understand and improve your English. Visit EnglishForward.com.